Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Careers Mare podcast with me, Jordan Andrews, and my beautiful, gorgeous, handsome friend, Jacob Power. Jacob, how are you?
I feel like it's 2024, Jordan.
Well, you wouldn't be far off there, mate, because it is.
I'm a bit worried because that's such a big number that it feels like something could go wrong at any second. We've never tried doing a podcast in 2024 because uh, we made a stylistic decision at the start of doing this podcast that they were all going to be in 2023. And I really felt like that was going to go on forever. But the runway ran out, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's sort of how time works, mate. but
That's what you get for making the format too rigid. So this
yeah,
is a whole new deal today, guys. It's basically a whole new podcast. We've ripped out some of the foundations and we're trying to put in new ones. So bear with us.
and swat. and and what better way to try out this brand new format than with one of our brand new friends, someone that we'd never spoken to before the recording of this podcast. His name is Anil Dawar, and for many, many years, he was a journalist. And we think you're going to find it very interesting having a little peek behind the curtain of that industry. Don't you think, Jacob?
Stop the presses because there's a new episode of the Careers Mare podcast. You can cut out that bit and use it as the trailer.
Yeah, it's not really what I asked, is it? But that's that's fine, isn't it?
Sorry, what was the question?
I said that'll be interesting, won't it, Jacob?
I think it will.
Right, just start it then.
We normally start off by asking, when you were very young, what was the first time that you ever thought about what you might do when you were older? And what was it?
When I was young, I wanted to be a barrister, and I don't
Hmm.
know why, and I don't know when that came about. I can remember being about 8 or 9, maybe a little bit older, and telling my uncle and my cousin that I wanted to be a barrister. And they were I can remember them being mocking because they said, "Well, you have to be able to make yourself understood." Make your point. Maybe when I was a kid, I was a bit of a rambler, and I remember being slightly hurt by it. But yeah, that was my first thing. Being a barrister, maybe it was TV dramas. When I was a kid, there
Mm.
was things like what was it
Rumpole?
called? Sort of Rumpole, but there's also something called Crown Court.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if you come across it. It's literally
Yeah, I
a
have.
undramatized version of a court case. So and I don't know, it always seemed quite exotic, but and I still think that sort of the brain have that kind of legal argument is quite enviable.
And is that something that you pursued at all, or was it more of
No,
like a childhood dream that
it
you
was a
had?
childhood dream. I think as the conversation progresses, you'll see that I, for a long time, sort of meandered my way through life and jobs. And so, yeah, making an effort. By the time I realized that to achieve something and to get to where I wanted took effort, I think barrister wasn't there because it had been too much, the sort of the training and the cost and whatever. I didn't even consider it at that point. And
Mm.
probably oh no, I don't have a criminal record. I was going to say I was probably be barred, but no, I don't have a criminal record. For the record,
That's a slightly odd thing to bring up out of the blue, like, oh, and I don't have a criminal record. That sounds a bit suspicious.
yeah. Well, just in case you're wondering,
So why did
just
you think you would be barred then?
Well, I wouldn't be barred, but I think maybe my difficulty with those sort of very establishment jobs is I'm not a very establishment person. And I think with those kind of jobs, with those areas, you have to act in a certain way. There's a language, and you'll probably the further on through your careers you go, and the kind of areas sort of people you meet, the very establishment figures have a language. Whereas I might say that I'm fucking furious. Their language is, I'm displeased at this suboptimal situation. Whereas, and I can't do that. I can't do that. And you have to be able to play a game or
That's it, yeah.
play
And
the game to be part of that.
yeah, otherwise you end up rocking the boat. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not what they want. The establishment is established, and that is it, isn't it? They don't want it changed. Not that I'd want to change it, but I'm just not that kind of figure.
So what was your first job? What was your first actual job, and how old were you?
I started paper rounds. I think a classic, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Kid in the 70s. I had a couple of shops where I did paper rounds when I was about 11 or 12, something like that.
No, quite young then.
Yeah, I always, 12, I had a bike. I like cycling, and I love sweets. So I had to have
Who
money
doesn't?
for sweets.
So you've married the two there. I like that.
Well, yeah, and for the shop owners, I suppose it was, and I sort of figured this out quite late on in my life. Is they're paying you £2, but if you buy £2 worth of sweets, they probably only paid you 80p or whatever it is, the value of the sweets to them.
Yeah.
So actually, thinking about it, I also was in a church choir. And I got paid to do weddings and all the not the church services, but all the other services, weddings or funerals, when they had a choir. We got paid for that. Again, pure sweet money.
Yeah. That sounds like a lovely thing to do, though.
Well, it was quite sweet. Looking back, it was quite sweet. We'd have our little books while the sermon's going on. We're all reading like Enid Blyton or the comics, whatever you're doing. You're just sitting in the pew reading, and you sort of walk through the church with a cross and candles, and yeah, it was nice actually. I've forgotten about that.
So have you still got a good voice?
No.
A singing voice?
No, not at all. Last night my mother-in-law was in a choir, and we went to this sort of carol service, and there was a couple of sing-alongs, and I'm embarrassed about this. I'm really embarrassed about my singing. Yeah. I definitely wouldn't be paid. I could be paid not to sing, but I wouldn't be paid to sing, definitely.
Was this carol concert in a church? Because
it was.
A church is the ultimate safe space for bad singers, because it doesn't matter when you're singing a hymn what your voice is like. Everyone just joins in, and
yeah, that's true. And I don't think people, and definitely you aren't being judged, but it is hearing your own voice is not particularly nice.
Well, get used to it with this podcast.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking as that sentence came out.
Yeah, I've got used to it now. This is episode 10 from editing all the episodes so far. I find I've got over it, the sound of my voice.
Did it take you long?
Not really. How do I think I sound compared to how I sound in my head? I think my voice sounds deeper to me than it really is. That's one thing.
I'd say the same for me, actually. Yeah.
I'd say mine sounds deeper. You're right, but also a bit more thick.
Yeah, I guess it's the same. And that must just be something to do with the acoustics within your own head, I guess, or within one's own head.
Yeah. Has it made you change the way you speak, either of you?
Not consciously.
So, maybe. I don't know. I haven't thought about it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't be the judge of that. I think I don't know, someone else would have to tell me if I sounded different.
Well, you do, because when we stop recording, you've got an American accent, Jacob. you just put this on, didn't you, for the pod?
Yeah, you sound like like an aristocrat, and I sound like Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins. We swap personas.
Yeah, we just swap, yeah. We finish recording, I go, oh, good heavens, thank God I can stop doing that ghastly voice.
So what would you say your accent is, Anil? Is it just North London?
Yes.
Not
And
just
I'd
North
say
London, obviously.
my accent's very North London, and actually, it's my mother despaired at me because she was very well spoken, and I think I used to be well spoken until I went to secondary school, which was this roughhouse secondary comp in Hendon, and I stood out like a sore thumb, and just had to blend in, and I think that was the start of this accent that I have now. My wife mocks me for it. Yeah.
Do you think if you'd kept your previous accent, then you might have become a barrister?
You know what? It may be. I think if I went to a different school, my whole life would have been different because that school I think, was particularly poor for what I needed.
Yeah.
I'm not very traditional in the way I am, but I think I have certain talents and my thinking's not particularly normal or usual. And they just, that school was all about damage limitation. Chairs being thrown through windows and teachers and pupils fighting. I can remember fighting in a class, but because a kid had brought his stuff to school in a plastic bag and the teacher didn't like it, ended up with a brawl between these two. That was it. Whereas I'm not a brawler, definitely not a brawler. So
You just reminded me of a story I saw online once. I don't know if it was real, but it was apparently a kid tried to annoy his teachers by bringing his books to school in a microwave and carrying the microwave around with him.
That's commitment to a joke, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is proper commitment.
I saw a similar one to that where a uni lecturer had banned people using laptops in his lecture hall. So someone came in with a typewriter and started really loudly typing at the back of the lecture hall and then doing the shing every time they finished talking.
No, I like that. That's good. Well, my first job after the paper rounds, I'd sort of got various Saturday jobs, and my first one was with a butcher's. I was a delivery boy on a bike on one of those old metal frame bikes with the rod brakes. You've probably seen the Hovis advert,
Oh, yeah,
a
yeah,
90
yeah.
It was
Yeah.
literally like that with this metal basket welded on the front. But when I left school, I just went there full time. But my dad was furious, that I had no qualifications. Him being Indian, education's everything. And so he came home one day and he'd walked past a shop near West Finchley tube station. And these little parade of local shops, and there was a little electronics shop, and they wanted a trainee. And he said, "Right, son, you're going to be a trainee electronics engineer." He goes, "Yeah, you're starting on Monday." And so I started off this electronics shop in West Finchley. But it became clear what the guy wanted. He got this massive batch of old car radios. You probably, way before your time. Basically, he had this massive batch of car radios, and he wanted to break them down into component parts, that, resistors and transistors and other bits and pieces that he could then use and sell or whatever. He didn't really want a trainee, so I spent like 6 weeks sort of desoldering stuff, and then he said, "Brilliant, thanks very much." And this was really poorly paid. It was probably 25 quid a week or something. But I've got a friend in North Finchley who wants someone permanently, a guy called Edmund Levy. So I wasn't really engaged. I just did it. I just moved on to this other place. And it was on the Youth Opportunity Scheme, which is sort of apprenticeship that the government, under Thatcher. And so I was doing 1 day a week at college and 4 days a week in this little shop, again in a little local parade of shops, selling his electronics and sort of doing minor repairs. But I'm a very poor student. So I didn't go to college much, and so he ended up fine with it because he didn't really need a trainee. So I was just he was teaching me bits and pieces in the shop and going out doing his business, and I'd run the shop for him, selling like really crappy old TVs and then repairing. Yeah, back then when electronics were relatively basic, it was simple repairs. Simple repairs. You'd sort of put your meter on and work out where the circuit was broken, repair the circuit or repair the part. Pretty basic stuff.
Did you enjoy it?
Um, I didn't mind it. I think I didn't see it as it wasn't like, yeah, I'm an electronics engineer and this is what it was never that. It was always, as it will become clear, I was sort of waiting to find what I wanted to do or be. And then it got too boring and I just sort of like, no, I can't be doing this, can't be doing this. And my cousin from Canada was an electrician. He ran his own business and he'd buy plots of land, have houses built on it, wire up the houses. It was in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He came passing through, and my dad, again being my dad, said, no, after he was going, my dad said, right, me and Mike, we've got you a ticket. You're going to Canada to work with him. You're gonna work with him as an electrician.
Sounds like you
And
never really had a lot of choice in the matter with this stuff.
no, it was a funny one. My dad was quite strong, and I think not knowing what I wanted to do in that sort of area of my life, in the sort of profession, I was just like, well, whatever, I don't. And actually, the idea of going to Canada was an adventure as well for me. It was an adventure. So yeah, I just sort of took off again. Didn't have a visa or anything. I don't know what, it was like, didn't have a Canadian driving license. It was just,
Okay.
it was all a bit.
How'd you manage to get over there then?
On a tourist visa, fine. But I probably didn't need a visa as Brit. I don't think you need a visa to get in there, but to work or, and so I was in, this little town in Nova Scotia, but it was over the winter. I don't know if either of you have been to Canada over the winter.
No, but I can imagine
No.
Nova Scotia's quite north, isn't it?
Yeah.
So-
It's coastal.
yeah.
I wake up the first time I wake up and there's ice on the inside of the window. And I'm thinking I'm British, it's snowing. We can't go to work in the snow. But there, of course, it snows all day. It's like, get up, get out. Looking back, it was a great experience to be there. And my cousin was a great guy, he was good fun and his mates were good fun. But working on building sites, sort of just running cables, that was what we were doing, was sort of running the cables through the empty houses. So they'll go to light switches and you do all the cabling before the walls go on. So and there was no heating, you have like all these little hand warmer things. It was minus 16, minus 17, and you couldn't wear gloves because you're dealing with cables, and it was pretty rough. And I was getting a bit homesick. I sort of was there for about 8 months over winter, and then thought, no, I can't be doing this. So I came back to England.
Sounds character building.
Yeah, well, that's I mean, you start to do stuff. You go, that's tough. It's tough. I can do stuff like that.
Yeah.
And is that were you thinking to yourself, I need to get myself a trade, or sort of still just sort of drifting a bit at that point, thinking, I don't really know?
I was still sort of drifting. I wasn't a particularly hard worker. I wasn't driven. Like my cousin who I was working with, he came from India to Canada as a kid. He was educated in Canada as sort of secondary level. He worked as a trainee, bought his boss's company off his boss. He was buying plots of land and becoming a property developer, and now, the guy's hugely successful in financial terms. He was driven, and I could see it's not me, I'm an employee. I'm not an employer. And so I was still drifting because nothing grabbed me. That hadn't grabbed me. And that's, later on in life, I found a job, a profession that grabbed me. And I knew this is what I want to do, but that wasn't it. So I came back to England. I was saying I'm not a natural for this. And a bloke in the pub who I knew said, oh, this company I work for, they're looking for a maintenance man. I think you'd be brilliant. Because they knew I'd been to Canada. maintenance man, around the offices. It was sort of subcontracted. So you had this company, like Pimlico Plumbers, all these tradesmen that, you'd ring them up and they'd go off and do their work. And one company wanted to contract a full-time maintenance guy for all their offices, and they used me.
And how did that go?
It was a disaster. It was a disaster. I was meant to be putting up mirrors in bathrooms, and I was cracking them, and I was like, oh man, it was, and I knew it was a disaster, and and they gave me, and that was it. I had a little van. They gave me a little van with their logo on it, Data General. Data General was one of the first computer companies, big computer companies, and I crashed the van, driving like an idiot, really crashed it.
It sounds like an episode of Mr. Bean.
Well, it was, yeah. Yeah. It could
Mr.
well
Bean
be that.
becomes a maintenance man.
Well, but the company that contracted me out, the guys who paid my wages, not Data General, the other guys who paid my wages, they were fine because they got paid for me. And then if it was something really serious, they'd send in one of their one of the professionals, one of the guys who could really do the job, to do it for me.
So were Data General paying like the bronze tier rate or something for they didn't send the really good technicians out? Were there different tiers? Like
yeah, I think it was more like aluminium. It's like it was right. We just got a bloke on site who can ring us up for you. Yeah, that's what you get for this money.
So what happened with the van? We kind of skimmed past that where you said you crashed the van. Yeah. What happened there?
So their office was out in Slough, and it's actually. Did you ever watch The English Office?
Yeah.
Ricky. Their office is part of the opening credit sequence.
Really?
It skims past. It was in Slough.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. I was going round a roundabout, and there was another car. It's dual carriageway. Another car very close to me. I ended up going onto a central reservation, not hitting a metal barrier, but and then I had to come up, and the wheel spun out, and I've gone flying across 2 carriageways and gone through a flower stand. The guys were just setting up the flower stand, so they weren't behind it. And I've gone straight through the middle of it, flowers everywhere. These 2 guys legging it either side. And I've gone down this little bank and hit a tree, come to a stop. I'm shaken. These guys were brilliant. So sort of decent. You're right. Blah, blah. And I felt really bad because I just destroyed their day's work. They couldn't sell those flowers. That's what they're there for. Anyways, policeman on a motorbike came past, and he's pulled over and he's seen me, and he's gone, he goes, "How fast were you going?" I said, "Probably about 30 miles an hour." And he goes, "I hope you can convince your insurance company because you're not convincing me." And he just drove off, Yeah, so I got a Rover, a really posh Rover as a replacement while that van was being fixed, which was the upside of the
landed
story.
On your feet then, didn't you?
Yeah.
So what came after the maintenance job? After smashing all the windows and flower stands?
I took it right back down to base. I became a van courier. I thought, clearly, I'm better at driving than I am at maintenance.
Not sure about that.
Well, you didn't see my maintenance work.
Those flower guys were quaking in their boots when they heard about that.
Yeah. So I just driving parcels around London. It was back in the day, couriers, like especially motorbike couriers, before emails and whatever. And so letters were just being, and parcel paperwork was being sent around the city all the time, just sort of important documents, parcels, spare parts. And so I did that for, probably a year, just sort of driving around. But the traffic, you just start to get all stressed out driving. But that was a simple job, it's sort of really back down to basics. I can drive. I was still crashed, but, You
You
know, not
crashed.
as badly, not as, you just sort of run into the back of someone or scrape the side, that classic.
How
Just
soon
say.
into it was that?
Not that soon. Not that soon. Yeah,
Okay.
it's like a roundabout. I don't know. Do either of you two drive?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You do. Classic roundabout crash is where you're behind a car and you're watching all the traffic coming
Mhm.
round, and you can
Yeah.
see a gap coming, and you assume they're going to go for the gap. And you start off, you turn around, and they're still there. Bang!
Yeah.
Just hit the back
Yeah.
of them. So it was never like on the flower stand scale again.
But yeah, notice you're avoiding answering how long after you started it was.
I can't. These little things. It wouldn't have been that soon. I genuinely wouldn't have been that
3
soon.
months?
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. But you imagine, but you've got to think, like, sort of the more miles you do, the more likely it's happened. So if you'd said to me how many miles in, I could have said, oh, it'd probably been about 10,000 miles before I had the first crash. You go,
Okay.
that's not too
That
bad.
doesn't sound too bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you put it like that.
Did the crash affect your prospects in that particular job at all, or did
No,
you just
no.
dust yourself off and keep going?
Yeah. Just yourself off, keep going. They just, their insurance is all. And this is back in the day when insurance wasn't quite as, it was nowhere near as expensive as it is now.
Hmm.
So it was all part, it was all part of the business. I expect it.
So what made you stop that job when you did?
I just found sort of, it was just all getting too stressful when you're under pressure, because you get time pressures. People are waiting for important documents, or did a lot of work for music studios, couriering tapes about, they've got a studio and they want they've got an engineer in the studio waiting for something, and you're stuck in traffic, and you're just getting pressured and pressured. And that's when the crashes happen, because you're getting pressured to move around quickly. And it's just like, no, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth it. So, and that was the end of that one.
So there's a bit of a theme developing here where you get a job through a chance conversation with
Yes.
someone. You do the
Yes.
job for a bit, and then you decide that it's not for you, and you move on to the next one.
Yes, pretty much. So that's it. I suppose it's just like going through a chocolate box, isn't it? Something, it's quite nice. You try it and you go, no, not really. Put half back. And then try another one instead. So my next one, again, not a chance conversation. A friend's dad worked for an auction house in North London. Not a fancy auction house. It's quite a small one. And they needed an auctioneer's assistant, which is basically humping and dumping all the furniture around. Again, going right back down. I've had enough of the driving. That was a bit too taxing. So now it's just muscle. All I'm doing is lifting furniture, carrying it around. It's general antiques.
Wow, we're really back in Mr. Bean territory now, aren't we? Like, he gets a job moving antiques around.
Yeah. Luckily, I can't say that I can't say I had a disaster there. Actually,
Okay.
no, I didn't. I don't think I did any Mr. Beanish kind of
That's good.
thing. It's very hard. It would be very hard. I mean, things break, but I don't think it was as a direct consequence of. There was two of us, me and a guy called John. Brilliant guy. John was from the West Midlands, and he was pretty much uneducated. He'd sort of had quite a rough upbringing, but he was the shrewdest guy I've ever met, the smartest bloke, really, really streetwise. He knew how to turn a buck, basically. And that's what these auction houses were all about. It was all about buying and selling. But it was a great job. Great, I loved it. It was, it's some lovely items. I quite like antiques. Antiques Roadshow. Watch it and you look at these items. Go, it's lovely, and you get to sort of look at these items and play with these items all the time. And you got some right characters in there. And basically, it was a 4-day-a-week job. The auction was on Sunday, and I think it was basically Monday to Thursday. And then Friday and Saturday, the bosses were just sorting out the fine detail of it all. and it was great.
How'd you end up leaving the auction house?
Um,
They sell you off?
no, they couldn't sell me. It's like let me out the back. I thought my life was in a bit of a rut because, like, as I said, it's a real sort of wheeling dealing scenario. It's all buy and sell, and I'm not a salesman. So I thought, as much as I love it, this isn't my future. So what am I going to do? And I decided to take some time out, and I went to Israel. It was what a lot of people did back then, was go and work on a kibbutz. All you needed was your flight money out there. They gave you food, they gave you shelter, accommodation, and a little bit of money. And it's in the sunshine, good hard work. And I have to say that's the real making of me, was going to Israel, actually.
So what did you do out there?
Well, I started off on a kibbutz in the north near the Sea of Galilee, and it was just agricultural labour. I worked in banana plantations, picked dates, just avocados. I was working on cherry pickers, and we had to like put in poles and cables across the top where they'd tie trees to get them growing straight. It was really good fun. It was great fun. Everyone's there just to sort of get away from things for a bit. A lot of booze, a lot of nice young people. I met my long-term girlfriend there, not my now wife, but I met my long-term girlfriend there, and we decided to go off traveling. She was going to Africa traveling after this, and I thought, I'd love to do that. So I left the kibbutz and I went to Tel Aviv and just sort of worked there, just purely earning money. I lived in a hostel, dormitory, it's like 8 people in a room, like labourer, pot washer, painting and decorating. Every morning you'd wake up and you go and stand outside it's a bit like seedy, a bit like a street hooker. You go and stand outside and these builders and their trucks would pull up and just point at people, and you get in the back and they drive you off and you do whatever day job they needed doing. But and that taught me like the value of actually, because everything was so insecure, taught me to work really hard because I wanted to impress these people. I didn't want to have to be like reliant on. I wanted to have some kind of security, and I want people to come back and say, "Yeah, we'll take you again." And so that was what I did for good like 6-7 months. But all good things have to come to an end. So we came back. I decided then that I wanted to go to uni. I wanted to go travelling again, basically. So I picked a Spanish language degree course because they send you away to South America for a year. So got on an access course because I had no qualifications from school. Got into the University of North London very easily. Got on a Spanish language degree course with history. 2 years doing it around Holloway, and then got sent to Chile in South America for a year. Studied there, didn't work, and then came back for my final year. All the time that I was going through university, I had to work because it wasn't a full grant. So I worked in the university library shelving books. I worked at Camden Market on a stall, doing map research. Just like people who were developers, people involved in property wanted to see the history of a site. I'd go to map libraries and down and sort of just photocopy all historical maps of that one site so they could see what's been happening to it over the last 200 years or whatever. That was quite fun. And then university ended and I still didn't know what to do. I still hadn't really got a clue. I couldn't be a Spanish historian.
It's always the way. Always the way.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, so I saw an advert for the BBC doing a traineeship, journalism traineeship. So I applied for it, but didn't get it. But I thought, you know what? I'd really, really love to do that. So why the hell not? I'd love to do it. So I went to I was unemployed, and because I was unemployed, the government would pay for me to go on a course. They paid for this course. The National Council for the Training of Journalists, it was like a 16 week or something fast track course. to get into journalism down at Lambeth College in Vauxhall. And so I went there and just started learning. I learned law, shorthand, how to write journalism, and just sort of general knowledge about the way councils work, government works. And at the same time, I started doing work experience on local papers, and that started me off.
So what had you experienced or up until the point when you thought you would like to try journalism that had made you think that you'd be interested in that?
I'm quite a good letter writer, and and I bet you two haven't written a long letter in your life, like a sort of.
When I was younger, yeah, when I was a
You did,
child.
yeah.
To
But
to Santa, but yeah, not
when I was traveling, I loved it. I had to share everything I was seeing, and we didn't just go to Africa, we were in Turkey, we were in sort of Eastern Europe, all the things we did, Cyprus. And I'd see these mad things. And I just used to write letters to my family, to my friends. And it was, a dispatch from, Congo or wherever. And people said, "Oh, we really love getting your letters." And it sort of, and that was part of it, was I like telling stories. And that's what journalism is. It's just telling other people's stories. It's relating what you see. And I thought that was part of it, yeah. The fact that I just sort of came to me quite naturally to tell these stories.
It must have been quite nice to find something that you already enjoyed as a hobby and then think to yourself, "Oh, actually, I could do this and get paid for it."
Yeah, I don't think I wasn't. I suppose I've never been motivated by money, to be honest. But yeah, I think that was it. And in my head, there was that sort of that dream of being a foreign correspondent, which I haven't been. I worked abroad, but I've never been a foreign correspondent. But it's sort of quite a romantic view of what journalism was or is or could be. I had that, and that, yeah, I loved it. I can remember reading foreign dispatches when I was a kid. My parents get the Guardian, and I remember reading stuff. Specifically, I remember there was this one piece by a guy called Ian Black, who was a Middle East editor, and he was writing from Gaza Strip or Lebanon or somewhere like that. And it was just, whoa! I want to do that. I want to be there. And I can remember that really grabbing me. And then I suppose I remembered that when I applied for the BBC job, I remembered that sort of desire. And that's what, yeah, set me off. And you're right, sort of suddenly finding this is what I do and what I could, get paid for, is turn it into a job. But the money was appalling.
Yeah, I bet it was.
It genuinely, at the beginning, when you're a trainee, it is appalling money. And I was older than most. I was sort of 10 years older than most of the other trainees. So I had a life. I had a life built. I wasn't living in a sort of my first home, flat out of home, which are generally worse. I built up a little bit of a lifestyle, and so it was tough. It was tough, very much, living on the overdraft.
How old were you at that point?
You took the words
I
out of my mouth.
was probably 31 at that point, 32.
And what kind of stories were you covering at that early stage in the local papers?
I think I can remember the first one that really sticks in my mind was when I was doing work experience. There was that was at the Hackney Gazette in East London, and there was a funeral for one of the Cray brothers, not the Cray twins, but their brother
The
Charlie.
third one that no one talks about. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Charlie, the softie.
Yeah.
And so I can remember covering that, but obviously it was a right old gangster funeral, all the beast, and I remember being there covering that. It's like, this is brilliant. And then
What was that like?
it was fascinating getting close to a lot of the characters that you knew about. Had Frankie Fraser. There was Dave Courtney, who died fairly recently. He was, and some other figures. There was also, after that, I mean, it's great being there and seeing it all, but then you've got to turn it into words. You've got to put it in the paper. And I remember I didn't write it because I wasn't skilled enough to write it. I was just relaying facts, and the pressure for everything to be correct. You get the wrong name, they show you a photo and go, "Who's that?" And I remember someone else who's doing work placement saying, "Oh, they got the name wrong," and I said, "Sorry, that's Mad Frankie Fraser." And there is a negative view of journalism, and what people don't realise is that we do strive to get everything right, and the pressure to get it right. Or I feel it, and I think every journalist should feel it. I don't think everyone does, but I can remember at that funeral just sort of making sure you got the names right, even the locations, all the minor details anyone can pull me up on. And I just liked being, this is an official source. That's what it felt like. We're now an official source
Yeah.
of official record of an event.
Yeah, so if someone, like, wrote a book about that person,
Yes,
probably that article would be one of the sources they'd use.
Mm.
yes, exactly. And I hate being wrong, basically, as well. I just hate being wrong. My wife, my kids will tell you more.
So, what was the progression from that local level?
So I did those weekly, like the Hackney Gazette and the New Shopper in Pettswood, and then the daily evening paper, Nottingham. And then I moved back to London because we were going to have my first son. Moved back to London and went on to the Evening Standard in London. And I don't think I would have moved back to London if we weren't going to have a kid. I really loved it in Nottingham. I loved what I was doing, but moved back to London, had to just find work, and started applying. What it was, the way it probably still works a lot now, is shift work, where the papers have what they call casuals, and they just employ them on a day basis, day rate, and you do a shift. And generally, when you're starting off, you're doing a shift like 5 in the afternoon until 2 in the morning, because that's when papers stop printing. And you do a lot of that, especially with the Evening Standard, because it does a lot of its work early morning. You'd be there, you'd do overnight work. And then I got shifts on the Daily Mail, and that turned it full time, just full time working there. Started off working those sort of night shifts, then going into day shifts, just doing general news reporting. Someone's died. You get the difficult work, you get the ugly jobs. Someone's died. Go and knock on their mum's door and find out how they feel about it, or criminals in court. You want to go and track them down and stuff like that. And there's a lot of time to sort of driving around the country, knocking on doors, and going to the register offices, getting birth certificates, death certificates, and just starting to track people down through this sort of mix of information. It was really exciting stuff.
Mm.
Now GDPR is a big thing, so the access to information is limited, more limited, but also there's so much work can be just done at your desk where you're going through Facebook and tracking people. And that's still interesting, but I did like the thrill of the chase and just sort of going out and trying to find people.
But since that was a national newspaper, I guess it was higher profile court cases and higher profile deaths and things like that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was like those sort of millionaire neighbours in a court case row over the size of a fence, or trying to get Nigella Lawson. Her brother had said something in about her childhood in a national paper, and someone tells me where she lives. I go round to the house and knock on the door, and back when she was with Charles Saatchi, and Charles Saatchi opens the door, and he's fuming. He's fuming at me. Yeah, how dare you knock on my door? How dare And he's just like shouting in my face, and it's like, I've got a right to knock on the door. You've got a right not to answer it. But there was when mobile phones were first coming out, a young lad had stabbed someone and nicked their phone, and he was in court, and so his address comes out in court, and they sent me to knock on his house, and it was this housing estate in Battersea, and I went to the door, got close to the door, and there was just this music, like the deepest bass you've ever heard, just rumbling, and it was some quite dark. It was just dark, and I thought, I'm not going to knock on that door. There's a couple of times where it's just like, no, nothing good will come from me knocking on that door in my suit and tie. And
But
asking,
what was the reaction? Because your bosses must have been quite hungry for the lead, so they must have
oh,
grilled
they
you
were brutal.
sometimes
They were
on.
brutal.
Yeah.
They were brutal. So the guys I worked for now, one is the editor of the Times, one's the editor of the Telegraph, another's the editor of the Sunday Telegraph. Sorry, Sunday Times. The Daily Mail back then it's still, in my opinion, it's the best product. I'm not talking about the politics of it, but the actual product is a really great product. And that was done because they were so insistent on the best quality work. And, if you didn't do the best quality work, it was public bawling out. One guy had a knife thrown at him. I saw, when
What?
I know it wasn't like a big knife. I say a big knife. It was still a sharp one. It was, one of those box cutting knives for like you
Oh,
just
yeah.
cut out.
Oh, like a Stanley. Yeah,
Not as thick as that, but quite a
Yeah,
thin
yeah.
one. And they use it for cutting out bits of the paper. You wanted stories, you just cut out
Yeah,
the
yeah.
story. And this guy had upset the news editor, and he just thrown a knife at him. Yeah, but you just accept it. I mean, back then it was just part of it, and it was sort of. I'm not saying it's right, but what happened with that kind of work atmosphere? What happens is you find people who really want to be in the job stay.
Mm.
If you're prepared to put up with it, and I was prepared not for that long. I moved to a different paper with a different atmosphere, but you want to be at the Mail, which is the best paper, and you want to survive there. That's what it takes. Now it's different, and I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, well, how much do I want this job? And for a while, I wanted it that badly that you take the abuse and the insults, and I never had a knife thrown at me, but
You obviously weren't trying hard enough.
Yeah.
So it really is like the way they portray it in movies, slamming papers down on your desk. It's like I need this scoop now.
I can remember. So I can remember one time there was case studies. We're doing a story about taxation. Really, I mean, it's really dry. And so what you always want to bring that alive is a case study. What does this mean for a couple who have 2 kids, a dog, go to private school, and smoke, drive a car? Because it's all about the taxes. They say, right, we want a case study. And I'm trying to find, and you've got to find someone who matches this profile perfectly. It's really hard. You don't just have a list of them. And I was trying to think of people, trying to work out, how to go to, trying to find ways, you go to a PR person, do you know anyone? Do you know? And remember the news editor coming over and standing over me and saying, right, you've got a case study, haven't you? I said, well, I'm trying to get one. He goes, right, so you've got a case study, haven't you? Well, I'm trying to get one. He goes, right, so you got a case study, haven't you? And I'm just thinking, what is going on here? What's going on? It's and you get that. It just these sort of it was sort of insane demands, and you've probably heard of Paul Dacre. He's the sort of legendary editor. He was the editor at the time, and he was as abusive to the people around him when it came to deadline, and he's trying to finish off the paper. It's a tough atmosphere. It's, people are under pressure and they want it to be perfect, and you get all kinds of shenanigans. At the Daily Express, the owner, Richard Desmond, punched someone to the floor because he decided not to do a story about a really unknown drummer who died. But the owner really liked this drummer. And they had an argument, and the owner just ended up punching him, and he's fallen and he got a 6-figure payout for it. But that's the kind, it's all kinds of things went on. And it just wouldn't happen now. It wouldn't happen now because the world has moved on, and I don't think papers are as influential as they were. So that the pressure inside, is less because they can't. When the Daily Mail could determine what a prime minister said or did, those days have gone. Prime
I mean,
Minister's got their own. They've got their own Twitter account. They don't need to even talk to the newspaper.
that's it. Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I would say I probably use the papers. I mean, I don't read a physical paper, but I read the stories they put online purely for football, really, to hear about stories in football. And then the rest of my general news I'll just get from social media.
Do you have trusted sources, or does it just sort of drip into your life?
Well, it's just whatever comes up on the feed. I mean, can you trust anything on social media? That's the problem, isn't it?
Well, I suppose if the BBC's blue tick feed, or
Oh yeah. When we're talking about like verified accounts and stuff,
yeah,
if I
verify, that's the word.
yeah, then yeah,
Jordan's
that's
mostly talking about QAnon.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
have my sources, Jacob. Don't you worry.
but yeah. So I mean, the some great time, and also you go out, pack jobs. What we call a pack job, where every newspaper sent someone to the same story. So either it could be that you're all competing against each other, or that there's not much, so you all work together. You don't tell your the desk will know, the news desk, your management will know, but you all work together and say, look,
Mm,
we've got this bit of information, you got that bit of information, let's share it. And we'll both agree that this is the story. Because what you don't want is the editor picking up the next morning's paper and seeing a different story from yours, because they might just for the hell of it say, that was a better story. Why didn't we have that story? So you both agree on the story, and that way you're both safe.
That's a bit of a shame, really, isn't it? Because the good thing about having a broad spectrum of papers is that if you read the same story in The Guardian and The Telegraph and the Daily Mail and the Times, then you've seen versions with slightly different emphases on them depending on the political leaning of the paper, and you've probably got closer to the truth than if you just read The Guardian all the time or you just read the Daily Mail all the time.
It's really funny, isn't it? Because sometimes, I do read, or I did read, a vast array of papers every day. You read every paper, and I know where I feel I am politically, and I don't relate that to my job, um, because I'm just a paid hack, basically. I'm just a paid
mm.
journalist, and I'll write for the Express, I'll write for the Guardian, I'll write for the Times, I'll write for the Mail, and I just write for them. And I'm not a political reporter anyway, but there's sometimes, I'm going through my Twitter feed, and you get a video of someone talking about some political event going on, current affairs. And it says, listen to so and so say why this is wrong. And I think it's right. So I won't want to listen to why it's wrong. And
Mm,
I catch myself doing that. And I'm thinking, really, you should listen to that. But I'm just thinking,
Definitely, yeah.
I haven't got time. I haven't got time for it. It, I've got I've got videos of like furry cats to watch and whatever. You
That's
know,
better. That is better.
it's more soothing.
Yeah.
It's far more soothing.
Well, I guess people don't want to, it's quite a scary thing to consider changing your mind, especially about something remotely controversial, because you're scared that you're going to alienate your friends or the people close to you, or you're going to become, it's going to affect your popularity or your social standing. So, quite often, if you're faced with the prospect of, reading or listening to something that you don't already agree with, you'll go, part of the reason why you won't want to is because you don't want to change your mind about that particular subject.
Or undermine your whole view of the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's human nature though, isn't it?
It is,
It's
isn't it?
it
And that's why
would
the algorithm
yeah,
can do it.
yeah.
It's a tough one, but and I think maybe more, and I think this is, I don't want to get really political, but I think like with Brexit, I think people weren't the people at the top, and I was working for the Express when Brexit came around, so where we saw it, but I don't think people at the top were really aware of how people who didn't think like them really thought. And it's
Mm.
that kind of thing, isn't it? It's an echo chamber. You've just got all these people saying, look, if you're intelligent, if you're smart, you think like us.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
We
we've got to
we
tell them,
get it.
be
Yeah.
smart, be smart. Don't be a thicko. Don't be a thicko racist.
Yeah.
And that's just an example where people, just need to be aware of other opinions.
Mm.
But it's, like you say, it's hard to take it in without the fear of undermining your whole sort of notion of reality or whatever.
Yeah, I think at the very least, you've got to try to understand how someone could hold the other opinion, even if you don't agree with it.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to try to empathize a bit, even if you actively dislike the other opinion. You've got to be able to.
I think, so as a journalist, what I thought, especially in Nottingham, I'm basically middle class, North London. I've never really suffered. I can't say that. And I went off to Nottingham, and I'd go to these villages. It sounds quaint, but they're just like a group of houses in the middle of nowhere that once fed a working mine or a steel mill, and no mines are closed down, no steel mills are closed down, and they've got nothing. It's just drugs, deprivation. They don't see the value in education because they've had generations of not worrying about education because they just went to the mills or the mines or they married a miner or, and you go to these places and you see, and I saw for the first time how people outside of posh London worked or lived, and it was an eye-opener.
So, the Daily Mail was the first national newspaper you worked for. And then how long were you there? And then what did you do after that?
I was at the Daily Mail about 3 years, and then I moved to the Daily Telegraph. I was there probably another 3 years. Neither of these jobs was I a staff. I didn't have a staff contract. I was just on a sort of casual contract, but full time. At the Daily Telegraph, I was working on the news desk, sort of middle management of a paper. And then I decided to go freelance. Sadly, that's when the crash of 2008 happened.
Oh, right.
And so I quickly got back to shifting, and then I was shifting at The Guardian, at The Times. Those two, basically, between them, was full-time work. And then the Daily Express offered me a staff contract, which, although not the ideal paper for me, was a lot of security. So I went to the Daily Express and stayed there, and I was general reporter. I was Home Affairs correspondent. So Home Affairs, I was dealing with people like Theresa May when she was Home Secretary, Priti Patel, a lot of the politicians around that, Sadiq Khan, Dominic Raab, in that field, dealing with them, dealing with the police. And then I went on to the news desk, and I stayed there until last year. Last August, I took voluntary redundancy. I'd been at the Express for 16 years.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I've survived. I've never been, I've never threatened with redundancy, but every time it just got a little bit harder and a little bit sadder. And it's not, as I remembered it wasn't fun anymore. It's just more process. So I decided to take voluntary redundancy, and at the same time, I got myself a job with the exam board AQA, which I've been doing since January this year, January 2023.
Some of my GCSEs were set by AQA.
I'm glad to
Most
hear
of
it.
mine were. Yeah, most of mine. It was either that or EdXL.
EdXL, Pearson, EdXL,
Yeah.
Or OCR. A few of them are OCR for me.
But AQA is definitely the biggest one.
So what do you do there?
So there, I run a website of theirs, a blog site called aqi.org.uk, which is basically set up to share the research that they do within AQA. They've got a really quite big team of academics who look at the science of assessment, qualifications, curriculum, and they do a lot of research. They're doing a lot into AI at the moment, digital exams, how students react with an on-screen exam compared to doing it with paper. Can they type better than they can write with pen and paper? Does that change? What they're finding is what they call the mode effect, that students write longer answers with a typewriter, with a keyboard, than they write by hand. But is that answer any better? Not necessarily. So I didn't realise how much science goes into the way they set exams. And talking to one, they're just talking about how much white space they leave around a diagram on a maths paper. They said, we've made the working outlines lighter because we did all this research, and it increases the cognitive load on students. So they make all these fine adjustments. So I work with them to write up blogs about their work, trying to share the best practice of how people set exams and how they design papers and marking, even mark schemes, stuff like that, which is very niche. I have to say, it is very niche, and it's not a huge. I'm trying to build the audience. That's part of why I was brought in. But yeah, I find it fascinating just talking to these academics.
I was just going to ask what drew you to that in the first place.
I needed to move on from newspapers. It's a very local job, and I think just specialisation again. I was sort of in middle management. And it's writing, it's talking to people. I love talking to people about their stories. I like academics. I like talking to people. I like big ideas, and the sort of when you talk to these people and you sort of say their knowledge is about a very small, a very narrow subject, and you just you go into these sort of little wormholes of, like I was saying about just making a working outline lighter to improve an exam experience. It's just. And so now I bore my wife and kids with it. My daughter doesn't want to know. I'm trying to say to her, look, you've got GCSEs coming up. She does not want to know one bit.
So, Anil, we are now moving on to the dream job section. And what we like to ask people before we get into it is, do you currently have a dream job? Or rather, a job that you wish you'd done?
Oh, yes, I do. I do, very much so.
Okay, good start.
Go on.
I wish I had been an international test cricketer.
Okay. I love it when it's completely out of left field.
Yeah.
I'm nowhere near. I've started playing cricket about 3 or 4 years ago. I just decided I wanted to play cricket. I've always loved cricket, and so I'm definitely. I play league cricket on a Saturday, and I'm definitely one of the least useful players, but I love it. I love it so much. But it's all day, and I just get loads of grief from the family. Your weekends, from Thursday through to Sunday, you're busy at the cricket club doing blah blah blah. Yeah, well, I can't defend it. Yeah, I am, and I love it.
What do you love about it?
I love. So it's not like football. I do like football, but there's time to think in cricket. So I like target shooting or stuff like that. And so when you're batting, it's almost like that, or bowling even. You've got a very specific target. It's not free flowing and just random things happening. It's like my job now. My aim is to hit the ball there, or to bowl it there, or to catch it. And so I like that. You've got these very specific tasks each time. And it's laid back, when your side's batting on a lovely summer's day, you're sitting in the pavilion, they built lunch into a sport, you've got to have time for lunch. That's how civilised it is. And you sit there and there's this lovely massive field of green in front of you, and you can watch and it's time to think, that's when you're playing and when you're watching. And if you take that to a level where you're travelling to Australia or South Africa or India or
so it's got the travel type into it as well.
That's it. And these really exotic places. So next year I'm going to India for the first time in my life to watch the cricket in a place called Dharamshala, which is on the Tibetan border, where the Dalai Lama lives in exile. And it's in the foothills of the Himalayas, and it's meant to be one of the most beautiful cricket grounds in the world. And I've never been to cricket abroad, and this will be my first experience. And I'm just thinking, I'm really excited. It looks beautiful. It looks beautiful. I'm thinking, if you were paid to play cricket there as well, and they throw in lunch,
Yeah.
and they throw in lunch.
Yeah, you'd hope so, travelling all the way to near the Tibetan border. So what's like professional cricket like? Is it like football when you've got one foot in the grave already when you reach 30? Or do you have older people than that doing professional cricket still?
With cricket, you can play till you're older. Partly because it's not as energetic as football, or not as impactful on your body.
Yeah.
But now with sort of modern science, the bowlers know how to look after themselves. You've got someone like Jimmy Anderson who's still bowling, and he's pushing 40, and he's still bowling fast.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, if it's if we're talking about your dream job, dream career, maybe we could, because you came to journalism quite late, we could slot this in just before you went into journalism. You could have had a stint as a professional cricketer. So like early 20s to early 30s, done that, had a nice 10 years of traveling, and then you went straight into the journalism. So you don't have to lose that, but it's still.
If only I had this. I just don't think I could ever pass myself off as a professional sportsman.
But this
is your dream.
This is your dream. My dream. Yeah. Sorry, in my dream world. Yeah, I reckon that would be about right. Yeah, sort of 20 to 30, because it's not going to last forever. Although, if I'd done that and then actually got into coaching and hung around with them as they went around the world, sliding doors and all that.
Or sports journalism, because you could be a cricket journalist, couldn't you?
Well, what? I mean, there is that. I wouldn't mind doing that, travelling around, following them. But the reason I started playing cricket was because I was so frustrated just watching and not being able to, and saying, "Oh, he did a great shot," when in reality, I want to say, "I did a great shot."
Yeah.
And I think that's genuinely what drove me. I got tired of talking about other people playing good cricket and just saying, "No, it's got to be me." I like an adventure.
So I know in football when you're playing internationally, you can represent countries based on your dual nationality, or if you've got parents or nans from different countries, that kind of thing. So who would you represent?
Well,
who would you play for?
That's when I go to India next year. Who am I going to support?
Yeah,
I think it would be India. I'd love to play for. I mean, they're a much harder team to get into. When I was growing up, they weren't a particularly good side. Now they're the powerhouse of cricket.
Are they? Yeah. Who is the best? Because I don't follow cricket at all. Who's the best country?
All round India. Australia just beat them in a World Cup final one-day game, but everyone was a bit surprised by that. Australia and India, between them, dominate cricket. England should have, but they've dropped off. But I'd play for India. Let's be honest.
Okay. Okay.
But
not necessarily because of any feeling of attachment, but just because they're the best team.
No, totally for attachment.
Oh, okay, right.
Totally for attachment.
It just so happens that they're the best team.
Yeah. And maybe, and this is funny, I've been thinking about it, because I support, when England are playing India, I support India. My daughter got mad at me. I celebrated India catching. There was some great catch by an Indian of an English. And my daughter's going mad at me. Why are you celebrating that? England are just out. She's very much an English supporter.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's because I like supporting the underdog or being alternative. And maybe in India, I might just start supporting England just because I'll be against the masses. Who knows? Let's see what happens.
You show up with your red cross painted on your face.
That's it, my Union Jack shorts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that all you would want to do? Is there any other aspects that you would want to bring in, or would you purely be content with doing the Test cricketing?
I think I'd be content with that, because what it does is you've got the travel aspect of it. Now, I think it'd be very hard to run a family, and so this is a dream job, and this would be before I settled down and had children. But yeah, I don't think I could wish for much more. Just being able to travel the world, do something
Mm.
you love, and be paid for it.
Well, I think that's it then. I think we found it. So
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
you shake our hands on that on that job?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
You're now an international test cricketer.
Thank you so much, selectors
You're
Jordan
now
and Jacob.
Yeah.
Now
Now
get stretching and get out there.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Anil, for coming on the podcast. It's been very, very interesting.
Yeah,
and
it really has.
I've really enjoyed this. It's just a really good sort of trip down memory lane and just good bit of self-analysis at the same time.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
Well,
Right.
it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you so much, Jacob. I've really enjoyed this.
Hey, Jacob.
Yeah.
That podcast, that we just did.
Yeah.
How's that?
What?
Because of the cricket. How's that? Because in the cricket they say that, don't they?
Do they?
Yeah, in the cricket they go. Someone hits the ball and they go, "How was that? How was that?
Are you being,
What did you think of that?"
what's going on? Are you being serious?
They're in the cricket, Jacob, and they say "How's that?" when someone does a good hit, don't they?
I don't know.
They definitely do.
I've never watched cricket, I don't think.
Oh, how's that?
What does that mean? How is that? Are they asking? Or is that?
I think it's like how was that? Like that was good, wasn't it?
Okay. So one of them says, "How was that?" and the other one says, "It was good."
I don't know. The more I say it, the more I think it's not real. But it definitely don't make me doubt myself. It definitely is.
But yeah, just a bit behind the scenes. Just before we started this outro, Jordan said to me, "Can I start because I've got a really good joke?" So clearly he thought that was going to be universal. Maybe it is. Maybe I am the only person who doesn't understand
Look,
it.
Anil will get it. When he listens back to it, he'll hear that and he'll think, yeah, like the cricket.
Well, I hope he does because he deserves it after a thoroughly entertaining podcast.
He does. And I'll tell you what else he deserves. He deserves a like and a rating on that podcast episode on any podcast platform that you're listening on, Spotify, Amazon, or Apple. Please do that for Anil. He needs it.
But Jordan, I mean, you can't actually like individual episodes, can you? So I suppose that you have to like the whole podcast, or else you hate Anil.
I guess. Yeah, actually, when you put it that way, it does sound a bit like you're being really horrible to him if you don't just give the whole podcast 5 stars.
Yeah.
And maybe when you leave a review, you could put 5 stars and you could put "How's that?" and then it'll be like a little in joke. Maybe that could be like a new bit, Jacob, in the podcast, like a new little in joke. Like we could just say "How's that?" Like
Yeah. Okay. Should we try it? Should we try it for the next 44 episodes?
Yeah, I think at some point in the episode we'll just have to say "How's that?"
Yeah, and if we forget, I'll just put it in really quietly in the background in the edit with loads of reverb on it, so it sounds like a ghost.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Listen out for that. Listen out for that, boys and girls.
And listen out for the next episode, which is going to be coming out on Monday, the 22nd of January.
It is. It's going to be the 22nd episode, and it's going to be the 11th. No, it's going to be the 22nd day of the month, and it's going to be the 11th episode. 11 times 2 is 22.
Yeah.
And
how's that?
Hang on. I'm working something here. 11 times 2 is 22.
22.
And if you give the podcast 5 stars for this episode, which is episode 10, 10 divided by 2 is... No, 10 divided by 5 is 2.
2.
So they go into each other 2 ice? 2 ice?
2
They
ice.
go into each other 2
2
ice.
ice.
And 11 goes into 22 twice. And if that's not enough to convince you to comment, then or to like and subscribe, then I don't know what is. And one final little thought is, if you are going to comment, what was it? Hauser!
How's yeah.
If you are going to comment Hauser on the podcast, please do, but it's only funny if you give it 5 stars. So I don't want to see any 1-star Hauser reviews.
It is. I just looked it up. It is a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So come back for episode 11 on the 22nd, please.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.